So it's been a long time since I made a making of video, but I'm back. So this is kind of a mix between a making of and a behind the scenes, and smush them together and you get a making of the scenes. There. So first off, we have the fourth dimension of darkness, which, as you probably guessed, is a miniature set that I composited myself into. This is where the set would be if I had it here. It's up on the shelf. Here is some footage of it. So I built the structure for the set out of foam board and glued it all together with a hot glue gun. And once I had this, I then went about coating the base structure in air-dried clay. But once the clay dried, it actually cracked a lot more than I expected.
It's a little bit more cracked than I'd have liked. You should moisturize.
But no matter. I can fix that. So I got some building sand and mixed it with PVA glue.
Sand.
And I filled in all those pesky cracks. And then once dry, I painted it, mostly with an airbrush, and then I added some little crispy foliage. So then to actually film the model, I darkened out my office, got the haze machine out and some RGB lights. And then this is the footage that I actually got from the camera. And after dropping a digital background in and doing a bit of color grading, this is what I was left with. So then I green screened myself and dropped that in. And there we have it, the fourth dimension of darkness. The best place for you to get your premium possessed sugar. Just don't let him see you. Whatever you do, don't let him see you. So the torso, onto the torso. The torso I sculpted out of monster clay. And then this is footage of me removing the teeth from the finished sculpt and trying to track where those teeth went. Like a dental record for a torso. I made a plaster mold out of the monster clay sculpt. And then once the plaster was dry, I removed the sculpt from the mold. And then, don't you know, I poured lovely liquid latex into that plaster mold. And once we removed the latex, we were left with this. Which I then painted, of course. Lots of painting. Painting. The painting for this one took a long time. I had to paint all the little individual fleshy veins. It took a long time. I think it looked pretty good when it was done. And then I glued the teeth back in. And I don't know if I filmed that. Did I film it? I guess not. The making of the extrusion, I didn't film. But you can rest assured that it involved a lot of liquid latex and cotton wool. So I had to improvise a little bit on the day when filming the torso. The original plan was to have the extrusion out of the mouth and then pull it in and then play that in reverse so it looks like it's bursting out. But every time I tried to pull it in, it would tear the teeth off the torso and it would get stuck. I hadn't made the mouth wide enough. So I had to keep gluing the teeth back in, which is difficult when the whole torso is covered in slime as well. You can't really glue on slime, so it just didn't really work. So I green screened everything separately. I green screened the torso shaking, the extrusion shooting up, and then I took a clean plate at the back of me going, oh, and then comped it all together in After Effects, like this. And of course the butter was real butter in the butter sack. And I forgot about it for 3 weeks, and when I discovered it, I was greeted by a sack full of rancid butter. My rancid butter sack. Which was nice to deal with. So this is exactly what we wanted. And here's our butter. So next, onto that egg. The egg of Cluglash, the inconceivable. So the egg, I sculpted out of polymer clay. I first started with a ball of tin foil, which I covered in a thin layer of polymer clay and baked, so I had a hard base to work on top of. And I made the first half of the egg, sculpted all the little lettering in, and then baked that. That way, if that was solid, I wouldn't damage it when I was making the next half of the egg that I sculpted out of polymer clay and then popped in the oven to bake as well. And then when everything was solid and cooked, I then painted it with a red paint oil wash. And then when that was dry, to make the little lettering look all gungy and bleedy, I mixed some epoxy resin with red paint and dabbed that in there. So in that set, it looked like bleedy letters, little bleedy letters. How cute. And when actually filming with the egg, I had to film the first set of shots with the egg intact. And then I got a hacksaw and cut the egg in half and painted the inside of the egg to then do the shots where I pour the contents out. Still full of contents. So the little beastie from inside the egg was a bit more challenging. I wanted to give some movement to the worm spawn, but couldn't use stop motion like I would have done previously. Because he's sat in a puddle of liquid and you can't really use the stop motion around the goo, it wouldn't really work. So I tried my hand at very basic animatronics. So I found a 3D print for a tentacle segment on the website Thingiverse made by the user Glock. Shout out to Glock, thank you, my hero. I essentially printed off like 15 of these segments and clicked them all together and then threaded a fishing line down the holes on each side, and then when you pulled a bit of the fishing line, the tentacle would waggle about in the appropriate direction. This is a tentacle waggle. So I glued this tentacle mechanism into the latex worm I'd made. I drilled a hole in the bottom of a mixing bowl and pushed the fishing line through. And then we were good to go. You pulled the fishing line and the worm would waggle a little bit. So this was only my first attempt at very basic animatronics, and the movement was very limited. The worm would just kind of curl up and extend. I think the real issue was that the mechanism was just too small for the thickness of the skin of the worm. So you try and pull this mechanism and the latex was so stiff that it would just go nyeh. You wouldn't get that full range of motion. And I think in the future I'll actually build my own animatronic from scratch, just to custom build it for what I actually need it for. So I just wanted to take a quick mid-video pause and take a moment to mention my Patreon page. So did you know that on my Patreon there's new monthly comedy sketches featuring characters from past videos that are long forgotten, such as The Small Men Named Kevin and Deerface. And every month you can vote to decide which Patreon video I'm gonna make next. And I've also started some monster lore videos as well. Show clips.
Well, hello there. I'm a small door-to-door salesman named Kevin.
Little information is known about both the bird and the birdhouse. However, all instances of sightings always begin first with contact with the birdhouse. This is believed to be a sort of test, which I will expand on later.
I've had to limit the number of meaty creature thumbnail shoutouts at the end of the videos because they take a long time to make, but there's a limited number of those, so if you want one of those, then act fast. So if you want to support my videos, because YouTube sure as hell doesn't want to, head on over to my Patreon page and pledge for rewards. Hello, it's Will from a slightly later point in time. I just wanted to say that if you did fancy supporting me and you didn't want to make the jump over to Patreon, then I've sorted out a couple of tiers of YouTube channel memberships that will allow you to watch the bonus comedy sketches and the monster lore videos and outtakes. I would say that you don't get access to the Patreon feed, so there's probably slightly less interactivity, but the option's there if you want to support. Okay, thanks. Anyway, back to the video. And now we're onto the flower demon, which was the biggest piece of crap in the whole video. I hate you. So the puppet for the flower demon consisted of a pair of fetching gloves, which I wore, and a static head that sat on a tripod. So to achieve the footage of the hands and the head rising out of the hole, I built a very rudimentary cardboard rig and then covered that in chroma key paper. Hello there. So I then sat underneath the hole and my hands emerged out of the top. And then I took separate footage of the head slowly rising out of the hole as well. And then removed the green screen and comped them together in After Effects. Finally, I had a little hole in the bottom of his mouth with a tube attached, and I filled the tube with tandoori masala powder to act as the demonic flower. And then blew the curry powder out of the tube. But the main issue was comping the footage together. That was the problem. That was the fun bit. Ow, they're surprisingly sharp. I'm gonna take this glove off. I had to take a monster and make it look like his hands were lowering into a static shot of a ring of flour when they had no physical interaction with each other. But I spent so much time on the digital side of these shots, and yeah, I'm still just not happy with them. I think they're the weakest shots in the whole video. But there you go. But I learned how to do it wrong, so next time I'm bound to do it right, right? And now, onto the family favourite, the Devil's Udder. So the Teat Demon was kind of tricky to build, but not difficult to operate. You just know my good little Milky Boy wouldn't let me down, unlike some other demons that I can think of. Dick. So I actually built his body out of furniture foam, and then I glued a thinner layer over the top to make it look like loose, sagging skin. I made the latex teats separately, and I think it's fair to say I devised a pretty ingenious plumbing system to get the milk flowing out of those teaty buttes. It was 5 tubes that would then eventually join into one, and I poured the milk in one end, and it would split out of the 5 teats. And I hid the inlet for the tube at the back of his head, and I sculpted his crowns in Blender, 3D printed them, and then sprayed them bronze. And then he was ready for his big moment. The magic of cinema. Obviously, I cut myself out of that a little bit. I'm so sorry. And then this is me pouring milk into the tube with a giant syringe. Look how the milk falls out of those teats at the bottom. That's a damn good teat plumbing system, and you know it. It's the day after filming the Teat Demon, and these teats are still dripping rancid milk, and it stinks. I don't think I'm gonna be able to clean this puppet. So the batter monster is pretty simple. I just made a puppet out of furniture foam and latex, and then I cut a hole in the bottom of a mixing bowl, glued him in place, and then I operated him with one hand, whilst holding the bowl with the other. And then finally, the cake, which was pretty simple. I just made a furniture foam cylinder, which I coated with a mixture of liquid latex and flour, and then made a plaster mold of the sigil, which I poured latex into, and then when it had dried, stuck it on top of the cake. And then I painted it all and added teeth, and there we have it. Oh yeah, and slime. For this video, lots and lots of slime. So I think that's everything. Thank you for watching. And if you can check out the Patreon page, then I'd really appreciate it. But if not, then no worries. Okay, thank you, bye.